night falls heavy over São Paulo. Rain lashes the city, unaware that within moments tragedy will carve its name into the skyline. At the heart of the storm, Congonhas Airport hums beneath the downpour, a normal evening, minutes before everything changes. A sudden flash, a burst of flame beyond the runway. No one yet knows what it means, only that the night has turned against them. Sirens pierce the storm. Emergency crews race through the floodlit chaos, drawn by the glow no rescuer wants to see. People stop in disbelief, a fire where aircraft should land safely. Voices tremble, phones capture what hearts can't comprehend. From above, the scene is confusion, fire engines crawling like red ants beneath columns of smoke and rain. In relentless rain, rescuers fight both fire and time. Every second the storm steals more hope. Within minutes, television screens across Brazil ignite with the words "Plane down at Congonhas." The nation holds its breath. Up in the tower, silence falls. The last transmission from TAM Flight 3054 ended mid-sentence. In the wreckage, fragments begin to speak. A boarding past the first whisper of who they were. Newsrooms erupt worldwide. A routine domestic flight vanished into flames before touchdown. Rescuers crawl through twisted metal, searching for signs of life amid burning rain. From the air, the scope becomes clear, a jet lost not in the jungle, but in the heart of a living city. The name appears: TAM Flight 3054. One of Brazil's darkest nights has just begun. The story of 3054 begins, a tale of rain, runway, and a system that failed its flight. It was a routine winter morning at Porto Alegre. Flight JJ3054, an Airbus A320 bound for São Paulo, stood quietly at Gate 2, waiting for pushback. The aircraft was PR-MBK, an Airbus A320-233 powered by twin CFM56 engines, a reliable workhorse across South America. As ramp agents fueled the jet, final load sheets were cross-checked. Every number matched a standard start to another shorthaul morning. Inside, 180 passengers filled the narrow single-aisle, business travelers, families, and daily commuters heading to São Paulo. The A320's fly-by-wire design meant computers assisted every movement, a seamless fusion of mechanics and code. In command was Captain Henrique Di Sacco, a 53-year-old veteran with over 21,000 hours. His co-pilot Kleber Lima, young but capable, had recently joined the A320 fleet. They moved methodically through pre-flight checks, verifying flight plan, weather, and thrust settings for departure. Runway 11. Forecasts warned of continuing showers at Congonhas, with slick runway conditions expected by arrival. The aircraft passed all pre-takeoff checks. Flaps 1 set, auto-thrust armed systems ready for a routine climb. Cabin crew made their final checks. Seatbelts fastened, galleys locked, the cabin was ready. The A320's lightweight aluminum frame and composite panels balanced strength with efficiency, every seat, every rivet designed for economy and safety. At 7:32 a.m., the A320 began its pushback. Engines roared to life, the start of another ordinary flight. Clearance came through. Flight 3054 was ready for departure, cleared on runway 11 bound for São Paulo. Both pilots confirmed the last items: flaps, trim, thrust, and control surfaces, everything within limits. At 7:35 a.m., Flight JJ3054 lifted into the clouds, its passengers unaware that this journey would end far from routine. After takeoff, Flight 3054 climbed steadily to 33,000 feet, settling into a smooth cruise toward São Paulo. Inside the cockpit, the crew monitored the flight plan. Autopilot engaged, a typical one-hour journey over southern Brazil. As they approached São Paulo's region, the onboard weather radar began to light up, storm cells rising ahead of their descent corridor. In the cabin, passengers barely noticed the first tremors of turbulence, just another bumpy approach through Brazilian skis. The aircraft entered a growing weather front, clouds thickening, visibility dropping. São Paulo's microclimate at work. Air traffic controllers in São Paulo tracked the flight, issuing routine advisories cautioning crews about heavy rain and a slick runway ahead. First Officer Lima read the latest ATIS. Wind calm, visibility 5 kilometers, rain showers over Congonhas. Both men prepared for descent. Instrumentation was stable, flight path correct, thrust and autopilot functioning as expected. Seatbelt signs came on as the jet began to shake, the familiar caution that always hides a pilot's growing attention. Outside, rain thickened into sheets. Lightning flashes revealed an aircraft surrounded by weather still steady, still routine. Captain Sacco and First Officer Lima rechecked the descent plan, adjusting speeds to manage the storm cell boundaries. Descent clearance was issued for runway 35L, the shorter of the two at Congonhas, wet and recently repaved. Radar data showed convective cells forming directly over the approach path, turbulence, strong downdrafts and rain bands. A brief caution flashed on their screen, just turbulence detection. Both pilots dismissed it, their tone calm, professional. As they began their descent into the storm, visibility dropped to near zero. Ahead lay one of Brazil's most challenging airports, Congonhas. Evening settles over São Paulo. Congonhas Airport, carved into the heart of the city, braces for relentless rain, its short runways gleaming like mirrors under fading light. For weeks, the runway grooving had been delayed for maintenance. Now, with water pooling across its surface, braking distance is dangerously reduced. Controllers monitor the flow of traffic through rain and low visibility. Reports of poor braking action begin to circulate on the frequency. Wind gusts reach 20 knots crosswind. Surface friction tests are suspended. The storm has arrived at the worst possible time. Pilots inbound to Congonhas fight limited visibility. Only faint runway lights pierce the mist, turning approach alignment into a test of precision. Inside the terminal, passengers grow restless. Departures stack up as crews await clearance to land on the rain-soaked strip. For TAM Airlines, this was routine weather, but maintenance crews knew Congonhas had a history of slippery runways and tight margins. Runway 35L measured just 1,940 meters short for a heavy Airbus A320. Even minor standing water could extend stopping distance beyond safe limits. Maintenance teams attempt to improve traction, but heavy rain quickly washes away their efforts. Pilots must rely entirely on precise thrust and brake management. Operations dispatch warns inbound flights of wet runway braking action medium to poor. Each crew now faces a high-stakes approach. Visibility drops to less than 1 kilometer. From the ground, only the advancing glow of landing lights signals another jet descending through the fog. Congonhas is surrounded by dense neighborhoods. Every approach passes just meters above rooftops. A city and its airport coexist on a knife's edge. Moments earlier, flights report long braking runs, wheels skimming over thin water film before grip returns. Crews feel the risk building. Meteorological reports confirm steady rain and crosswind. Yet the airport remains open. Commercial pressure outweighs precaution. As the night deepens and the rain persists, Flight JJ3054 enters São Paulo airspace, unaware that every variable ahead has aligned against them. The crew of Flight JJ3054 begins their approach briefing. Captain Henrique Stefanini Sacco and First Officer Kleber Lima review the weather at Congonhas. Visibility poor. Runway slick with rain. The airport reports light rain, winds at 9 knots, and a wet, ungrooved runway. The crew checks the ILS frequency for runway 35L. First Officer Lima enters the landing data. Approach speed 135 knots. Flaps full, auto brake set to medium. Captain Stefanini reminds his co-pilot to set both thrust levers to idle on touchdown, a routine procedure critical for full braking. The weather system over São Paulo grows more intense. Air traffic control warns all incoming flights about standing water on the runway. Both pilots methodically complete their before landing checklist routine for now, but every step will later be examined in the investigation. Descending through 7,000 feet, the crew reports established on the approach, fully configured for landing. Unknowingly, one thrust lever remains in the climb position, a mechanical quirk that will soon define the tragedy. Air traffic control clears them for final approach. The crew maintains calm professionalism, unaware that one setting is fatally wrong. The descent continues through turbulence and rain, the glow of São Paulo just ahead through the stormy veil. In the cockpit, both men are alert. The tone remains steady, an ordinary landing at the end of a long day. Data later reveals one engine at idle, the other still producing forward thrust, a configuration never intended during landing. Gear down, final checklist complete. Congonhas runway 35L glistens ahead, wet, short, and unforgiving. As the aircraft nears the threshold, the cockpit fills with quiet concentration. Seconds before landing, everything appears normal. The final moments of approach. In 9 seconds, flight JJ3054 will touch down, but the stage is already set for disaster. The descent into São Paulo begins. Visibility drops rapidly as the Airbus A320 enters the dense cloud layer. Both pilots maintain a calm focus, unaware the runway below is slick and treacherous. Autopilot keeps the descent steady. Instruments show stability, but below the cloud deck, rain continues to pour over São Paulo's urban sprawl. The flight path passes directly over São Paulo's congested airspace. The storm cell deepens, and visibility worsens to less than 1 kilometer. The São Paulo approach instructs Flight 3054 to maintain 4,000 feet. The crew acknowledges, adjusting heading toward the final approach fix. Captain Daisaku gives one last reminder about the wet runway and reduced braking. The cockpit atmosphere remains composed, professional. The aircraft emerges from the clouds at 2,500 feet. Wind and rain whip across the wings as they align for runway 35L. One thrust lever remains slightly advanced, a mechanical anomaly that no one in the cockpit notices. The crew lowers flaps to full and reduces speed. The Airbus lines up perfectly with the runway axis. Visually, the approach looks flawless. The runway appears ahead, its reflection glimmering through sheets of rain. Congonhas Tower clears them to land. Flight data would later show a stable approach on the glide path, with speed and altitude within safe limits, nothing abnormal. With more than 17,000 flight hours, Captain Daisaku guides the Airbus calmly toward touchdown. First Officer Lima monitors descent rate and airspeed, his voice steady over the intercom, two professionals working in unison. On the ground, the runway glistens under heavy rain. Surface friction is dangerously low, yet operations continue. All landing systems appear set. The cockpit is calm, the descent controlled, an illusion of safety moments before impact. 12 seconds to touchdown. Flight 3054 is on final approach to Congonhas, perfectly aligned, unaware that one lever will betray them. 4:55 p.m. The Airbus A320 crosses the threshold of runway 35L at 140 knots. The rain is relentless, the runway slick like glass. Captain Daisaku gently pulls back. The main gear prepares to touch down. Every system shows normal. The wheels hit the soaked tarmac. Water sprays violently as hydroplaning begins to form beneath the tires. One lever is still in climb power. The left engine begins to decelerate, but the right engine keeps pushing forward. Airbus logic interprets the asymmetry as manual input. No warnings are displayed, no alarms sound. The left engine enters reverse thrust. The right one, still in climb, accelerates, instead a deadly contradiction. The captain instinctively pushes both levers to reverse again, but the right one resists, still locked in climb detent. With reverse on one side and forward thrust on the other, the aircraft veers right, fighting physics on a slippery surface. Speed indicators fluctuate wildly. The aircraft's deceleration is uneven, unbalanced, dangerously delayed. The smooth runway surface and lack of grooves amplify the hydroplaning effect. The tires cannot grip. Both pilots fight the aircraft's momentum. Their voices rise as they realize braking power is almost gone, only a few hundred meters remain. The aircraft slides uncontrollably toward the end of runway 35L. The Airbus warning finally activates, but it's too late for any recovery. The A320 bursts past the runway boundary, still under asymmetric thrust, heading straight toward the TAM Express terminal. In less than 17 seconds after touchdown, Flight 3054 becomes unstoppable, a perfect storm of weather, logic, and human trust in automation. The Airbus A320 passes the end of runway 35L, still pushing forward under unbalanced thrust, no stopping distance left. Inside the cockpit, both pilots push against the impossible rudder full left, spoilers extended, but momentum keeps growing. The right engine continues to produce full forward thrust, dragging the aircraft diagonally toward the terminal. The plane's speed drops, but it's drifting right, hydroplaning, sliding across the soaked pavement. Inside the cockpit, chaos fills the air. The aircraft now moves beyond human control, automation and rain taking over. The jet crosses the boundary where braking zones should have absorbed it, but there are none at Congonhas. Witnesses on the road see only a fire-bright shape roaring through rain, vanishing into the airport's right side. At 4:36 p.m., Flight JJ3054 leaves the runway and strikes the TAM Express facility. The impact unleashes instant fire. The cockpit fills with blinding white light, then silence, as both flight recorders capture their last seconds. The explosion pierces the storm, seen from neighborhoods across São Paulo. Congonhas goes silent. In the tower, silence fills the frequency. The radar tag for TAM 3054 disappears from the scope. People rush from nearby shops as the inferno spreads across the terminal, fueled by full tanks of jet fuel. Emergency crews race toward the wreckage, fighting fire and rain. The runway now a mirror of destruction. Within minutes, the skyline turns gray with smoke. Brazil's largest city watches in disbelief. The storm has passed, but its price is unimaginable. Flight 3054 and everyone aboard are gone within seconds. Within seconds of impact, fire erupts through the TAM Express terminal, an inferno consuming both aircraft and building. Fragments of fuselage scatter across the airport perimeter, as survivors on the ground flee from the firestorm. Witnesses describe an overwhelming heat wave, the sound of explosions echoing through Congonhas. The TAM Express office and cargo depot are instantly consumed, the blaze spreading faster than responders can arrive. São Paulo fire units reach the scene within minutes, battling both flames and the relentless downpour. Inside the terminal, heat and smoke make it impossible to see. Rescuers advance blindly, guided only by instinct. The A320's left wing acts like a fuel torch, burning through structure and lighting secondary fires across the hangar. Fire teams coordinate across both runway ends, deploying foam lines to contain the explosion site. Inside the control tower, disbelief takes hold. The radar blip of TAM 3054 has vanished, replaced by a wall of flame. Flames spread across the building facade, melting signage and windows, a haunting image seen across Brazil that night. Citizens and families arrive near the perimeter, helpless as the fire paints the sky red over São Paulo. Thermal cameras reveal internal fires still burning. Each hotspot marks trapped wreckage and human remains. Hours later, responders shift from firefighting to recovery, marking fragments, searching for the black boxes. By midnight, flames subside, leaving a gray skeleton of the terminal, the runway still flooded with rain and foam. As dawn approaches, the toll becomes clear. All 187 aboard and 12 on the ground perish in Brazil's deadliest air disaster. Within minutes of impact, São Paulo's emergency network triggers a level 5 disaster alert, all fire and medical units mobilized. Multiple brigades converge on the airfield, each carrying foam tanks, thermal sensors, and breathing gear. Medical teams prepare triage points, uncertain if any survivors remain near the terminal's edge. A temporary operations center is set up inside a mobile van, coordinating airside and city rescue channels. Every frequency fills with overlapping transmissions, a city responding in real time to a catastrophe. Fire suppression intensifies. Crews alternate between cooling metal fragments and sealing fuel runoff. Inside the ruins, heat remains extreme, readings near 900 degrees, too dangerous for entry. Police seal off access roads as crowds gather. Authorities begin to control what has become a disaster zone. Television crews transmit the first live images, the nation watching in disbelief. The airport shuts down completely, all flights grounded as the investigation perimeter expands. Emergency medical units coordinate on-site oxygen stations, portable lights, and decontamination tents deployed. São Paulo hospitals issue red level alerts, intensive care units cleared for potential casualties. Airspace is restricted, yet media aircraft hover for aerial visuals, authorities warn of interference. Brazil's Air Accident Investigation Bureau (CENIPA) arrives on scene to secure data, recorders, and evidence. As midnight falls, rescue turns to recovery. Hundreds remain on site, a silent vigil beneath the lights of Congonhas. Just minutes after the crash, the first alerts hit national networks. A commercial flight has gone down in the heart of São Paulo. Anchors scramble for verified details, confirmation slow, but the scale of the disaster becomes clear. In every control room, producers battle timelines. Chaos, urgency, and disbelief blend into a single word: tragedy. By evening, every major network cuts to continuous coverage. Brazil unites under one heartbreaking headline. Breaking banners repeat the words, a loop that echoes across millions of living rooms. For hundreds of families, the first confirmation doesn't come from officials, it comes from the TV screen. Crowds gather at TAM's offices. Journalists press for answers, executives remain inside behind closed glass. The airline releases its first public statement, a somber acknowledgement of the loss and a promise to cooperate fully. By dawn, Brazil declares 3 days of national mourning. An entire country shares the grief. From smartphones to car radios, one story floods every channel: the tragedy of Flight 3054. Messages of sorrow flood social platforms, digital grief uniting millions beyond borders. As midnight nears, people gather in candlelight vigil. Silence fills the air where sirens once screamed. For many, grief turns personal: a name, a face, a seat number remembered forever. The world's media picks up the story. Brazil's skies, once symbols of progress, now filled with sorrow. In the wake of Flight 3054, Brazil pauses. News turns from shock to reflection, a moment frozen in collective memory. By early morning, rescue teams give way to investigators. The scene, still steaming and silent, transforms from disaster to data, every footprint now part of a timeline. Specialists from CENIPA arrive at dawn, their task: to recover every clue from a field where evidence and emotion intertwine. Even hours after impact, isolated fires flare again. fire crews work in rotation, ensuring no spark interferes with recovery operations. Each fragment is numbered and plotted. The crash site becomes a massive jigsaw, every piece essential to reconstructing the final seconds. Within 24 hours, technical representatives from the United States and France join the operation, ensuring data is handled with global oversight. The first breakthrough, the flight data recorder. Burned, but intact, it carries hundreds of parameters that hold the truth of Flight 3054's final seconds. Moments later, the cockpit voice recorder is found melted casing, but memory module intact. 2 black boxes, 2 vital voices. In a nearby tent, the recorders are stabilized and cataloged. Data transfer begins immediately, secured under chain of custody protocols. Investigators recover both thrust levers, noting the right lever locked in climb, a detail that will soon define the entire investigation. The wreckage is catalogued piece by piece. What once was an aircraft now becomes a timeline, physics and forensics writing what memory cannot. Among the debris, a manual emerges open to the thrust lever procedures. For investigators, coincidence and evidence begin to overlap. Every photograph is a data point, every reflection a reminder. Recovery is not just mechanical, it is deeply human, an act of respect. As night falls, the operation pauses. A moment of silence spreads among the crew, 153 lives lost, honored in the quiet of twilight. Even among investigators, grief finds space. In the field of destruction, a single candle burns, defying the dark. The work will continue for weeks, but tonight marks a turning point, from flames to facts, from chaos to understanding. With the wreckage secured, the investigation enters its analytical phase. CENIPA, Brazil's aviation authority, assumes control, assembling experts from 3 nations. The black boxes, now cooled and cleaned, undergo their first inspection. Each connector and chip holds traces of voltage that record time itself. Engineers begin digital extraction, capturing hundreds of parameters: airspeed, thrust angle, braking force, and autopilot inputs. The first irregularity appears. The right engine maintained climb thrust even as the left entered reverse, a mechanical and procedural mismatch. At Airbus in France, digital reconstruction confirms what the data suggests: a thrust lever mismatch could override normal deceleration logic. Computer models recreate the conditions at Congonhas: rain, smooth asphalt, no grooving. The simulation predicts hydroplaning within seconds of touchdown. In Washington, the NTSB team decodes the cockpit voice track, correlating pilot calls, warnings, and the moment control was lost. When merged, both recorders reveal a chilling timeline: power asymmetry within 2 seconds of touchdown, followed by braking failure. Investigators overlay weather radar, runway data, and flight path vectors, cross-confirming that visibility and water depth matched simulator predictions. In a parallel lab, the physical lever mechanism is tested. The right-hand channel remains jammed in climb detent, confirming asymmetric thrust. The flight control computer logic is visualized. Auto brake function is inhibited when any engine reports climb thrust, a safeguard that turned fatal. By day 5, CENIPA issues its first technical bulletin, identifying thrust lever configuration and slick runway as the leading contributing factors. The world hears the first official words: human error, mechanical misconfiguration, and environmental limits combine to end Flight 3054. Newsrooms amplify the technical findings, translating complex systems into simple headlines and reigniting debate across Brazil. From bits and numbers, a picture forms. Flight 3054's tragedy now tells its own story, one that engineers, not eyewitnesses, finally decode. In every Airbus cockpit, the twin thrust levers act as the pilot's direct link to power synchronized movements that define takeoff, climb, and landing. Under normal landing, both levers are pulled to idle, then into reverse after touchdown, providing immediate braking thrust. But on Flight 3054, the left lever entered reverse while the right stayed in climb. The aircraft's logic saw asymmetry and rejected reverse mode activation. The flight control computer detected forward thrust on one side, a condition that disables automatic braking and thrust reverse functions entirely. Within milliseconds, the logic chain blocked every deceleration aid brakes, spoilers, and reversers because one engine remained at climb power. With one engine pushing forward and braking disabled, the aircraft skimmed across the rain-slicked surface powerless against hydroplaning. Inside the cockpit, the captain pulls back hard on both levers, unaware that one remains locked, leaving asymmetric thrust unchecked. The result: Engine 1 fought to slow the jet, while Engine 2 kept pushing it forward, a deadly internal tug-of-war. The braking computer waits for both reversers to deploy before engaging auto brake, but with one in climb, the system locks out braking completely. Data playback shows the fatal chain compressed into seconds, thrust asymmetry detected at 2.3 seconds. Skid onset at 4.1. The uneven thrust spun the jet slightly rightward, pushing it off centerline and toward the terminal complex beyond the runway end. The pilots switched to manual braking, but on the soaked surface, rubber and water form a shield, rendering their effort almost useless. In the lab, investigators confirm the positions recorded at impact: one lever full reverse, one unchanged, sealing the case. The root cause emerges: a single overlooked step returning both levers to idle before descent transformed routine landing into disaster. From circuits, levers, and data logs, the throttle mystery is finally solved, revealing how precision betrayed by assumption led to catastrophe. The recovered voice and data recorders offer a second bisecond view of what really happened inside the cockpit the last 40 seconds of Flight 3054. 37 seconds before impact, the aircraft touches down slightly long on the rain-slick runway. Both thrust levers move toward idle. The flight computer immediately registers asymmetry: Engine 2 still in climb thrust. The braking system is automatically disabled. The captain commands reverse thrust, his tone firm but controlled, unaware one lever remains locked, denying the braking sequence. The data confirms the imbalance: the left engine reducing power, the right sustaining forward thrust, forcing asymmetric acceleration. Within seconds, the cockpit erupts in warnings, yet the crew's focus narrows to stopping distance. Every meter counts. 22 seconds before impact, the thrust imbalance grows. The aircraft begins to yaw right, slipping off the centerline. The crew transitions to manual braking, but data shows zero deceleration force. Hydroplaning has begun. Despite attempts to slow, speed barely drops. One engine still propels the jet forward, unstoppable momentum building. Rain, thrust, and confusion: the left reverser deploys, the right engine pushes ahead. The aircraft's balance collapses. The computer adds more warnings: speed brakes and spoilers remain stowed. Every aerodynamic brake is still locked out. 9 seconds before impact, asymmetric thrust overcomes steering. The jet veers off the runway toward the TAM Express terminal. The data track confirms the drift. 200 meters past runway end, right gear hits the grass verge. Ground contact readings spike. At 18:54 and 32 seconds, all parameters cease. The cockpit falls silent, a life's final seconds captured in electrons and echoes. Investigators replayed these seconds countless times, aligning every tone, every vibration to reconstruct how human instinct met machine logic. As investigators combed through the wreckage, attention shifted to the runway itself, a surface many pilots had warned was dangerously slick. For months, crews had reported poor braking performance here during heavy rain, especially since runway grooving was removed for resurfacing. Runway grooving shallow channels cut into the surface helps drain water and reduce hydroplaning. Congonhas lacked this vital safeguard. The Civil Aviation Authority claimed the runway met minimum standards, yet internal memos revealed concerns about friction levels. Engineers later discovered the slope of the runway allowed water to pool near its midpoint, creating a film that trapped the landing jet. Media networks exploded with debate who approved the runway reopening without grooving. Was it negligence or pressure to resume flights? Experts explained that at 155 knots, hydroplaning on smooth asphalt can occur even with partial braking, leaving no stopping margin. Reconstructed simulations confirmed it with one thrust lever misconfigured, and no grooving, hydroplaning became unavoidable. The friction coefficient readings below 0.3 should have grounded operations. Yet no NOTAM or restriction was ever issued. Only 2 months separated the resurfacing completion and the crash. Investigators later noted the absence of grooving was a critical factor. The public outrage grew. Reports surfaced showing pilot unions and safety inspectors had flagged the risk long before tragedy struck. A year later, the runway was finally grooved and resurfaced. Too late to save the lives of 187 souls, but enough to change regulation. He recalls landing there countless times. It felt like landing on glass when it rained. We all knew it, but the system looked away. In the end, the runway told its own story, not of a single mistake, but of decisions ignored, warnings unheeded, and lives lost in bureaucracy. The final report would list the runway's condition as a contributing factor, a quiet acknowledgement of warnings that came too late. In the days after the tragedy of TAM Airlines Flight 3054 Airbus A320-233, the company entered a phase of quiet shock and internal reckoning. Within 48 hours, TAM Airlines assembled its highest safety and operations officers to analyze what went wrong beyond the headlines. Every line item from fuel policy to thrust lever protocols was re-examined to trace the final minutes of TAM Airlines Flight 3054 Airbus A320-233. The manual section on asymmetric thrust during landing was too brief for the complex Airbus control logic involved. TAM's pilot training division began replaying the scenario of Flight 3054 Airbus testing, whether simulator behavior matched the real-world data. The data matched closely, confirming that the right thrust lever had remained in climb position while the left was at idle. In the Airbus A320-233, this configuration prevents automatic deployment of ground spoilers, a critical braking aid during landing. Investigators determined that the right engine continued producing forward thrust even as the aircraft decelerated, accelerating the slide. TAM's internal team produced a 68-page safety report recommending procedural retraining, thrust lever interlock reviews, and checklist updates. The review also examined whether maintenance calibration errors could have caused the lever misalignment in the Airbus A320-233. Beyond the engineering data, there was human loss. TAM staff gathered to honor colleagues lost aboard Flight 3054 Airbus A320-233. A mandatory bulletin was issued requiring dual crosscheck of both thrust levers during every landing phase of all Airbus operations. TAM introduced new wet runway modules, teaching crews to reject unstable approaches and to verify thrust detents before touchdown. The CEO promised transparency and full cooperation, a public vow to rebuild trust after the Flight 3054 Airbus A320-233 disaster. The internal review closed 3 months later, a turning point that reshaped TAM's operational philosophy and Brazil's aviation safety culture. As dawn broke over São Paulo, the city was quieter than ever. Behind every window, someone mourned a name from Flight TAM 3054. At the airport gates, families gathered, some searching for answers, others holding on to fading hope. Their grief filled the air heavier than the smoke still rising. "I still hear her voice every night," she says softly. "She called from the airport, said she'd be home for dinner." Soon, grief turned to resolve. Families filed lawsuits against TAM and the airport authorities, demanding answers the wreckage couldn't give. Inside, emotion met evidence. Every technical term, thrust lever, runway friction, carried the weight of 100 lost lives. Witnesses described a system too complex for its own safety, a design that left no room for human error when a lever stayed in the wrong detent. Each word from the stand was a dagger. Each technical phrase, a reminder that a simple oversight could destroy entire families. Investigators demonstrated the final seconds, one engine thrusting forward, the other at idle, the imbalance no pilot could overcome. After years of legal hearings, rulings brought partial accountability, but no sentence could balance the loss felt in those seats. Some found closure, others found only exhaustion, but all carried the same weight. The truth came too late to save anyone. Every July 17th, the names light up once more. A reminder that behind every cockpit switch and every runway report are human lives. 17 years later, some still can't return to airports. Others turn their grief into advocacy to make sure another TAM 3054 never happens again. The files fill shelves, thousands of pages of pain, arguments, and numbers, yet the silence between them says more than the verdicts ever could. The story faded from the front pages, but in homes across Brazil, the echoes of that runway never stopped. From grief to justice, from silence to remembrance, TAM Flight 3054 remains a reminder that aviation safety is written in the tears of those left behind. 6 months after the disaster, Brazil's busiest runway reopened, now grooved, redesigned, and redefined as a symbol of learning through loss. Engineers implemented new friction standards, deeper grooves, and stricter rainfall drainage limits, addressing the hydroplaning risk that doomed TAM 3054. TAM introduced full-motion simulators dedicated to wet runway recovery and asymmetric thrust emergencies, training every pilot for the unexpected. Airbus modified throttle and ECAM logic, ensuring that mismatched thrust lever positions would trigger unmistakable alerts before touchdown. The world took notice. ICAO, EASA, and the FAA revised their wet-runway certification guidelines, a ripple effect reaching every airport that faces rain. Procedures were rewritten from checklist formatting to cockpit callouts, reinforcing the simple but critical act of confirming lever symmetry. Brazil's aviation regulator, ANAC, expanded oversight with continuous data audits and surprise field inspections, restoring public confidence in domestic air travel. Inside TAM, a cultural reset began. Safety was no longer a department, it became the core philosophy written into every briefing and every flight. Airbus engineers and TAM maintenance teams collaborated directly, studying how design meets daily operation, bridging the gap between cockpit and factory. The reform spread across Brazil. More than 40 airports upgraded drainage and surface grooves, redefining safety as a national mission. From classrooms to labs, researchers analyzed the hydrodynamic behavior of tires, developing predictive models that now guide future runway design. By 2009, ICAO adopted Brazil's findings into global safety briefs, marking TAM 3054 as a key study in the fight against runway overruns. Media reflections captured not tragedy, but transformation, a nation turning heartbreak into prevention. Today, the memorial doubles as an aviation classroom where new pilots learn not just how to fly, but why safety must never be assumed. The legacy of TAM Flight 3054 lives in every improved checklist, every runway groove, and every life that lands safely because of the lessons carved into that rain-soaked runway. Every year at dawn, São Paulo slows down to remember the 199 souls whose final flight changed aviation forever. Families arrive quietly. Some speak in whispers. Others simply stand their silence louder than any prayer. Each name carries a story, a promise, a journey, a life that once soared through the clouds. At 11:48 a.m. time stops. For 1 minute the city listens to the silence that replaced the sound of Flight 3054. Inside TAM, operations pause. Pilots, engineers, and attendants observe a minute of silence, the sky momentarily still. Across Brazil, air traffic halts for 60 seconds, a collective gesture that binds an entire industry in remembrance. We didn't lose them to the sky, we gave their memory to it, so every pilot remembers them when they land safely. Built on the very ground of the tragedy, the memorial's circular design represents unity, no beginning, no end. Each new generation of aviators visits this site learning that safety isn't just a checklist, it's a legacy of respect. As night falls, one light for each soul illuminates the path, their glow reflecting on rain-soaked ground, mirroring that fateful night. Music fills the air not as performance, but as remembrance. Every note carries the weight of what was lost and the grace of what was learned. Faiths unite here not in separation, but in shared hope. The sky belongs to everyone, and so does the lesson. Every year, strangers join families releasing paper planes marked with messages of love, each one a promise to never forget. In the distance, 2 aircraft cross the sky, a silent salute from the pilots of today to those who never returned. 18 years later, the city still remembers, not just the crash, but the courage, the change, and the light that emerged from the darkest rain. Over this city's skyline, the memory of Flight 3054 lingers like a shadow in the light, a story of courage born from loss. At the Congonhas Memorial, families return each year where rain and light meet, and every candle breathes a name. Each inscribed letter is a pledge that the rules written in blood must never be forgotten. From tragedy emerged progress, stricter standards, safer runways, and knowledge shared by pilots worldwide. Every story told here stands for truth for the people whose lives became lessons in aviation safety. Created with respect for the crew, families, and investigators who transformed pain into prevention. Where once chaos reigned, quiet light now guides arrivals home. May their memory remind us that every checklist and every procedure is written in human cost. This has been a Crash Deck Diaries production where every flight tells its truth.
This film was crafted with precision, every frame, every sound, every heartbeat to honor truth above drama. Behind every investigation, there are storytellers determined to make sure these lessons reach the skis once more. You've watched stories written in courage, loss, and discovery, each one a chapter in aviation's unending pursuit of safety. This has been a Crash Deck Diaries original where every flight tells a story, and every story reminds us the sky remembers.